All right. So people are slowly coming into our meeting. I think everyone is able to see the screen. Everyone is able to see our new office and at least our new small conference room here in our Hamburg office. Welcome to everyone who is joining us today to the release event of the 2023 AMPOWER Report. We're very happy that I think over 200 people joined our invitation, and maybe some more are going to join in over the next couple of minutes. So yeah, thanks for all of you guys for joining us today in this presentation. We want to, same as last year, we want to guide you a little bit through the major findings of the AMPOWER Report 2023, which covers the previous year, the 2022 year, as well as a 5-year outcast in metal as well as polymer additive manufacturing. With me here in our office is Maximilian Munsch. He's the main author of the market report and the expert in metal additive manufacturing. Also from the just freshly came home from the US, from the AMAG, is Timo Führer. In our call, he's our expert for polymer additive manufacturing. Max will guide you later on through the numbers after I give a quick introduction about AMPOWER, about our report. And both Timo and Max will answer all your questions later on after we did the quick presentation. Overall, I think we're going to take about 35 minutes, maybe for the presentation, maybe 40 minutes, depends a little bit. And then we can take your questions after that. And I would kindly ask you just to write questions into the Q&A session. It should be open. You should be able to ask questions right now. So just leave us your questions as soon as anything comes up. And yeah, I hope you're going to find everything interesting, and you're going to find interesting findings of our report this time. Let me start with a quick overview of what 2022 happened for us in additive manufacturing, what happened with AMPOWER. We launched our report, I think, our 4th edition of the report last year in March. This year is the 5th edition of the report. But besides that, the main work of AMPOWER is actually consultancy work. It's related to consultancy projects. In the last year, we had about 40 consultancy projects in additive manufacturing completed, mainly in the area of go-to-market, due diligence work, implementation strategy work. Those were the major topics in the last year. Many companies are joining the additive manufacturing industry. They're working with us and implementing their technology into the market, finding the right markets, and so on. That was a lot of the work we've done last year. We also completed 3 technology studies. The one technology study that Max was taking care of was copper additive manufacturing that had been completed, I think, around April last year. Metal sustainability was released in autumn last year, where we developed CO2 footprint calculator for different metal AM technologies and some conventional technologies as well. And in November or December last year, we completed the total addressable market study for metal. And that was the main 3 studies we did last year. Also, we launched an academy together with Benjamin Haller, who joined us last year as an external expert for the training work. And we launched the first 4 courses. There's a 5th course now already online for cost. There's a couple more courses following this year. So check it out. It's free of charge. Just try a couple of courses and a couple of contents. It's always a powerful tool if you want to implement additive, if you want to scale additive within the company and the whole engineering team. We also released a new tools website last year. We published first 2 tools for additive manufacturing. The first one is a cost calculation tool which has a very transparent algorithm for calculating costs and breaking it down to the different process chain steps. We also released the CO2 footprint calculation tool that we developed in the study last year. And yeah, you can also check out our tools website to see if there's something worth for you and something that brings you added value in implementing the additive. Yeah, talking about the AMPOWER Report 2023, in terms of our breakdown we did, and in terms of the scope we did in the report, not much changed this year compared to last year. So we are working on a continuation of the methodology and on creating enough historical data and outlook data and widening the database more and more to give it more depth and more weight in terms of numbers. We have over 70, I think it's 75 in total figures and graphs, breaking down every kind of aspect of the additive manufacturing market. We look at the last year, so 2022, end of 2022 is the date we are looking at, and the outlook for 5 years. Same as last year, same as the years before, we're asking users as well as suppliers of their outlook. So that gives different aspects of the additive manufacturing market outlooks from different perspectives. We have invited a couple of regional experts to give us insights into certain regional developments, either of R&D or startup developments in certain areas or other fields where companies are evolving in specific regions. We also updated our database, which is now regularly being updated. You can, if you are logged into our report, you have access to the database, which collects all the machine suppliers, all the system suppliers that are public, most of the systems that are currently public and being sold of an industrial scale, material suppliers, and part manufacturing suppliers, so service suppliers. So overall, we have over 30,000 data points now in the report, which means with additional historical data, with additional interviews every year, the data is becoming wider and wider, and the base is becoming bigger for the report. Yeah, let's have a look just very quickly, because there's not much change, and I think many of you already joined us last year for the report. The segmentation is the same. We still have 2 different interview groups as the major interview partners. Each of the interviews we're doing is personal, so most of the interviews are simply phone calls, or they are visits to companies where we look at what's happening, especially on the user side. We like to look at how users are using the technology. That's one of the most important aspects of our report. We want to understand how much material is running through the machines, what type of material, what type of applications they're using, and so on. In terms of segmentation, we segment into regions, different AM technologies, different material groups, and the different industries. Those are the major segmentations you will find in our report. All right, let's continue now with the deep dive into the specific report data. Max is going to guide you through the major findings, and starting with the key findings of the 2023 report.
All right. Thank you, Matthias, and welcome everyone. Before I start with going through the numbers, there was a comment on the chat that the cameras might not be working, so we might not be online with the camera. I think the people can only see the slides. Maybe you can try to fix that. In any case, welcome to the report. I would like to give you an overview on what the major findings were the next couple of minutes. So for us, it was very good to see, and this is the first point, that especially the system suppliers are back to record revenues. There was a couple of rough years following the pandemic, and now pretty much in polymer as well as metals overall, the numbers show that the record revenues of 2019 have been overtaken now. So we're at a total of 2.5 billion from 2 billion about 2021. However, there was quite a varying growth here. So some companies were quite successful in their growth with double-digit rates, while some other companies, established companies, had only, let's say, smaller single-digit growth over the last year. So quite varying success, but overall the market is growing at a very fast rate of around 20% per year. Second key finding was very interesting to hear. This is especially coming from the users in metal as well as in polymers, that a lot of users said, okay, we need to focus on productivity. This doesn't always mean buying more new machines, but it's mostly also that the industry has a lot of knowledge gathered over the last years and is now focusing on better utilizing the existing machine capacity they have. So they're focusing on, for example, on part-of-bit fusion, finding new process parameters to have a higher layer height, and by using the capacity they have in-house to make this more productive without necessarily investing more. And this is of course increasing the need for feedstock in the end, and this is the key finding we think in number 3. This is especially for metals, that the consumption grew by quite a fast rate and is expected to grow even more by more than 40% over the coming 5 years, especially in metals. So there's quite a big driver from the higher productivity of these machines, from more machines on the market, from 20% increase of the system supplier sales. So there will be more machines installed in the market running at higher productivity, but also other technologies with very high throughput are coming on the market and are now finally utilized. For example, binder jetting, for example, DED technologies like arc welding. These technologies are the drivers of this, and they will push the feedstock growth over the next years by quite a lot. So let's take a look on an overview of the whole market. We report this year that the total supplier revenue was about 9.5 billion euros in the year of 2022. It grew by around 15% from last year or the year before to 2022, and is going to continue to grow by around 18% over the next 5 years. This includes metal and polymers. Today, polymers are around 2/3 of this total market, metal only 1/3, but metal will grow by quite a faster rate. So in 5 years, 2027, where the market will be around 22 billion euros, we expect that half of this market will be coming from metal and half will be coming from polymers. So quite a big shift towards metal technology over the coming 5 years. Today, the total revenue is made up out of three areas that we differentiate. One is the system suppliers. So this is essentially equipment. This is printers. One is material feedstock, and one is part manufacturing suppliers. And here our definition is that we only include those that are delivering parts into multiple industries. This is a definition we have been running for the couple last years. So companies that exclusively only sell parts into one industry are considered for us users in this area. About the segmentation, the largest chunk here today is coming from part manufacturing suppliers, especially from polymers. So, for example, today there's around 4 billion coming from part manufacturing suppliers, and in 5 years this will grow to 9 billion. So quite a strong growth over the next couple of years. Move on to the regions. So we distinguish between 3 major regions, Americas, EMEA, as well as APAC. Taking a closer look here only at the system supplier market, this has been growing quite well and will continue to grow quite well. So for the next 5 years, we see a very steep growth of around 25% for system suppliers in these 3 markets. The drivers are always a little bit different. Let's start with the Americas. First of all, in the Americas, the US has, of course, the largest impact. Around 90% of all the revenues are generated in the US, and will probably stay around this. But we see more and more activity also from South America. First companies investigate into this field, especially in metal now, polymer, is a bit advanced here in this region, but it's gaining more interest, but still at a quite slow pace. In EMEA, certainly today the largest markets are still Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. We see, especially in the Middle East, that there's an increased activity. A lot of the OEMs are opening up distribution networks in these areas. Users are beginning to look into this. There's state funding programs that are facilitating the investment into AM, and a lot of the goals of the regions may be associated with AM in the future. We see large capacity build up here and there. So this is quite interesting to see. But we also see in the EMEA region more and more systems being located now in Eastern Europe, in metals, for example, also in Turkey, with very strong dental focus, where a lot of machine installations are today. In APAC, China is certainly, in terms of system sales, the by far dominating market, with around 60–70% of the revenue generated in these industries. We see for Chinese polymer fusion suppliers on the metal side, very, very high growth. This is outpacing the other machine manufacturers in the markets in Americas and EMEA. They're mostly selling on the domestic market, but with very high double-digit growth rates in this field. Other countries are following up, Singapore, Japan. There's much to be expected over the next coming years, and they will, on relative, grow faster than the Chinese market, if you look at the relative numbers on the total market. Interestingly, the average machine price in the APAC region is quite a lot lower, though, as in other areas. For example, in the Americas, the machine price that we see in metals is almost double that as in APAC. So we can see that either the machine costs less, especially interesting to see in metals, or the machines are smaller. But on average, the reported numbers indicate that the average machine price is quite a bit lower in this field. So quick look at the industries. This year for metals as well as in polymer combined, the system sales revenue have the industrial sector as leader. They take about 11% of the total revenue in this field, so roughly 250 to 300 million euro. There is a lot of companies investigating this from the industrial field. It's a quite diverse sector. A lot of companies are first and foremost focusing on jigs and fixtures in this field. It's a very easy market entrance, and then it enables them to have more time to find suitable applications. An example that I put up here is the electrical connectors. It's a very interesting field in the whole of electronics on the polymer side, where we see in the electronic semiconductor field quite some interest with quite a big potential in the next years to come. So we'll see in this market how the development will be. On the past years, the leading industry was medical, and medical still has very high yearly investments, but didn't grow compared to the year before. So there was a little bit of hesitance in investing more into machines. We talked to the users, and they pretty much said that they built up a lot of capacity over the last few years and are now trying to optimize it. They're still in second place overall, but yet the growing is a bit faster. We see also investigation into other technologies that they haven't been looking into before, like sinter-based technologies, like printing with high performance polymers like PEEK and PEC, printing with biomaterials, other biomaterials, or investigations into printing, for example, directly in a clean room in a hospital. So there are some activities in medical as well, but maybe it needs a couple more years for another large push. Certainly, one of the biggest drivers, especially in metal, is the space industry. So when we see in the metals markets, there's, due to the space industry, a very, very big push towards larger machines. We see these machines now beyond 600 millimeters towards 1 meter now released, with 8, with 12 lasers. So very high productive metal powder bed fusion machines. And we also see that in this market, looking into the metal market, they have by far the highest average in terms of machine cost if you just break it down. So it's beyond €1 million on average for these machines sold into the space industry. And this is mostly polymer fusion today, but as we saw just recently, last week, I believe, from the example of relativity space, DED has a chance to win market share here as well. So much more is to come with these high throughput technologies now that we saw that it's possible for these technologies to succeed. All right. So let's take a look at the trend of sales by unit. This is a graph we have been publishing for the last years, showing on one side the historical sales. That's what you can see with the darker black line on the bottom left. So we are today at around 1,700 units sold in laser and electron beam powder bed fusion. So these are metal technologies. And what we do every year, of course, we predict how the future will be for the looking at the supplier forecast. So what the suppliers tell us, how the market will develop, and on the other side, what the buyer tells us, what the future will look like. So certainly the truth is somewhere in between, but over the past years, our forecast has been quite accurate for the buyer forecast. So when we look at the last year, the user predicted around 1,650 machines, and we landed at 1,670 machines for this year. So if we look in the future now, in 2023, our prediction is pretty much coming from the buyers for 1,800 machines and the suppliers around 2,000 machines. So we'll see next year at the same time where we're at. But what we can say here is that pretty much the supplier predictions have been scaled down. So a lot of large companies that we talk to, the outlooks have been decreasing over the last years. It didn't just start last year, but they have been decreasing. So I think it's a very good sign in this field that often the hype is not carried over, and it's an industry that is now maturing and is now converging towards pretty much the user expectations in the forecasts as well, which is much more healthy for the whole industry. So one outlook also into a very specific graph here for laser beam powder bed fusion. Something that is interesting to see if you follow the market in this technology, the demand for larger machines. So what you see in this graph is the share of units for the different sizes of laser beam powder bed fusion machines. There was on one side the sales in 2021 and the sales in 2022, as well as the right two bars, the supplier as well as the buyer forecast for the next 5 years. We distinguish today pretty much in 3 different categories in our report. One is the small and medium section, which is below 350 millimeters. So laser beam powder bed fusion, let's say the historical machine sizes. And then we have the large machines up to 600 millimeters, and then beyond, which we call very large for 600 millimeters. So the sales in 2021, they just started in this sector, were at 2%, and now we're already at 6%. So quite a big share in units. This is not revenue, but in units is increasing here. And it will continue to increase over the next 5 years. So the supplier forecast is here in 2027 for 15%, where the buyers thinks it's around 10%. This goes hand in hand with the number of lasers in these machines. The very large systems are usually sold with multiple lasers, 4, 8, or 12 lasers today. So the number of lasers per machine, the productivity per machine will also increase by quite a lot over the coming years. So let's take a look a little bit more at the maturity of the technologies. This is a graph that we update once or twice a year. It shows the maturity on one side, the technology. This is the x-axis, on the other side, the industrialization index. The technology is pretty much how far the technology has been progressed, how robust it is, how good the sensors is, how good the process is, etc. On the other side, we think it's also important to look at how good the industrialization maturity is. This means how well has this technology established itself, how many users are there, how many sources are there. If there's only a monopoly of one company, large users are hesitant to pretty much only buy or put their future production of a certain technology, of a certain application, just into the hands of one supplier where they might lose access in the future. So this is also important, the sourcing of a technology. Or, for example, today, very important as well, the standardization, how far has the industry come for a certain technology to enable certain applications. This is, for example, a big jump that we see in wire electric arc, or wire plasma arc. These are one of the biggest jumps from the maturity compared to last year. Since we see here first and foremost more users interested in this technology, we see many startups now putting out machines, and we see also first standards being established that allows, for example, the oil and gas industry to enable new applications or to replace casting. So this is a very important step in order to get these technologies and these machines into the field to produce parts. Another big jump we see in electric mean part bit fusion. The majority or the largest reason here for us was that there's many new players that entered the market. We see now first machines installed from these new players. A monopoly that was held by GE or Arcam over the last 20 years. And now with these new companies in the field, these new OEMs, we expect new materials to be seen, awareness from the customers, and new applications to come. So for the next two slides, let's take a look at polymer a bit more in depth. What we see here in this graph is the share of sold industrial polymer systems by industry and technology. First, I'd like to mention that in our report, we only look at industrial polymer systems. So we make the cutoff above 10,000 euros. So anything below 10,000 euros is not tracked by us in the report. We do not track in the report the home user systems. We focus on the, let's say, industrial professional systems that are cost more than 10,000 euros. This graph now shows by the different technologies that we distinguish the share of machines that are sold into the different industries. An example here are the automotive industry and the consumer goods industry. Automotive is shown on the left side, and the consumer goods is shown on the right side in the brighter blue bars. So as you can see, there's quite a big difference, especially, for example, for the material extrusion technologies. So in automotive pretty much goes hand in hand with how the industry works. In automotive, we see a very big need for fast production of jigs and fixtures, decentralized. And this is the reason why we see a lot of units sold into this area from many different departments in automotive that have installations of these systems all around their globe. It's not centralized. It's very much decentralized. And there's sometimes not even one department that has or able to track all the different printers in the company anymore. On the other side, we have the consumer industry. They are much more focused on polymerization technology. They found that for setting up automated or even specialized manufacturing of some applications like lattice structure, shoe soles, or sports equipment, this is very much a cost-effective and very, very productive technology with the area-wise wet polymerization, but also wet polymerization in consumer goods are very interesting. Examples are here, for example, in Asia, production of small figures of toys in fairly small lot sizes, but the need for very good surface quality, so these parts can directly be painted afterwards. Another example where polymerization is very interesting today is dental industry, for example, to produce molds for dental aligners. It's a very interesting field with quite big users today. where they print these molds for indirect manufacturing or these aligners, still investigating the direct printing, but they have invested quite a lot now into these supply chains. And for example, here they have polymerization production facilities that are more or less fully automated. So it's an example where polymer technology has been very successful in producing serial applications. Overall, polymer is used only in 50% of the production capacity is used in serial production. Polymer is of course still used in 50% of the cases, still very much in prototyping. One of the, for polymer, one of the key benefits for this technology. Right. And the last slide on the technology on polymer. As before, we see here the industrialization index as well, the technology maturity index on the bottom, missing the x-axis title. Big jumps is here just a continued focus on, for example, powder bed fusion. One of the, let's say, most mature technologies from multiple companies, but we also see some larger companies now enter this market with their own systems. So it's interesting to see, for example, with Nexus 3D, how much of a competition they will be to EOS or 3D Systems dominating the market in the past. Another company, where we expect more progress over the next couple of years is thermal powder bed fusion. So here HP was the market leader and pretty much an inventor of this technology. With the introduction of these Strata systems, will be interesting to see if this maturity will increase more over the next few years. This is what we at least expect to come. Another area that has been a little bit of let's say less progressing over the last years is material jetting, mostly dominated by Stratasys. But we've seen now the market entry of several new startups that offer very high productivity systems. We expect that here also new and different kinds of material properties will be enabled. And this is interesting for the user at the end of the day to give this technology a chance and maybe find more applications and also have a general improvement of the technology in this field.
Okay, thanks, Max, for the overview. Some of you are already using the Q&A session. It's labeled under F&A, to just let you know. Some of you were asking. It's in German, so Fragen und Antworten. That's the German word for questions and answers. Just feel free to post something there, and we're gonna hopefully be able to answer it later. Just a quick overview on what's going to happen to us in this year. What are we planning this year? Obviously, you are very welcome to meet us. It's one thing to talk over phone, over Teams, or any other kind of web tool, but it's always the best way to actually meet in person. We were at AMAC this year. We will be at Rapid TCT as well in the US and also in the UK at the Rapid. I think still it says US here. That's the UK one. We will be at AM Forum in Berlin this year, and as well as at Formnext. Probably a couple other fairs and exhibitions coming up over the year where we don't know yet. But always feel free to visit us or meet us at one of the events. Again, the invitation to join one of our studies. The ones that are running in 2023 are still the liquid resin benchmark study, where we are evaluating a number of different industrial resin printing systems. To lift a little bit the curtain on real material properties, capabilities, how you can use it for industrial products. Also a sustainability study where we evaluate, where we program a CO2 footprint calculator for polymer technologies for the 3 of, I think, 4 even main polymer AIM technologies. This study is also still running. You can still join into the team. It's still running for a couple more months. So there's still a window open to join the study. Also in the addressable market, we are looking at the total addressable market in polymer AIM. That's also a study that's been running for a while now and will be closed somewhere in summer this year. Shortly before the kickoff, we are now with a tool study. I think in April or latest in May, we're going to kick off the tool steel study, where we're looking at the tool steels that are available for laser powder bed and electron beam powder bed fusion, but also especially looking at the tool steels that are available for sinter AIM technologies, for FFF sinter AIM technologies, as well as binder jetting technologies. There's a good potential to actually print tools with tool steels that are mainly available on the market in those types of technologies, whereas in laser powder bed you have sometimes difficulties with those traditional tool steels where maybe sinter AIM can add value. And we want to look at this very closely with a number of companies, mainly from automotive, mainly from tool steel manufacturers, where those companies join us, and you are well welcome to reach out there. Last one is an EPBF benchmark. That's still a very early stage, but we all know that there's a couple of EPBF technologies or vendors on the market now, and we want to look closer into how do they differentiate. What new materials are possible now with those technologies, new build sizes, new process chain steps or simplifications along the process chain. So if you are interested in electron beam powder bed fusion, make sure to reach out and see if we can support with independent data there. And one more time, obviously, again, for next year already here, the request to join us in this survey, especially on the user side. That's the most important side for our report, to understand every user need in every kind of industry, in every kind of niche. If you're a user of additive manufacturing, if you're running material day in and day out through your machines, reach out. In exchange, you always get some access to the report. It's always a very nice conversations we're having with you guys, exchanging about latest developments, and it helps in the end all the industry to understand your needs better, and it's always an added value for every party that's involved. All right, let's start with the Q&A session. I'm going to switch again to our video. I turned it off for the purpose of having a better screen. I think I'm gonna close the main window and just switch to our video. There's a couple of questions that came in already. I want to just go through it. I think let's start with the easiest one. What is hybrid binder jetting? I think that was coming up when you showed the maturity index for metals, and hybrid binder jetting popped up very much on the right, I think, as far as I remember, not with such a high industrialization index, but with a high technology maturity, as far as I remember. Can you refer to what do we summarize under hybrid binder jetting?
Hybrid binder jetting is a specific category we use. I think it's the 1 or 2 today. I think there's pretty much only 3 DEO.
Yeah.
It's a part manufacturing / system supplier based in Los Angeles, California. They have a system where they generate the two-dimensional form through other means than that is typically printing. So please check out their website. I don't want to tell too much. I'm not sure what is in the public domain, but please check out the website 3DO. That is today what we consider as hybrid binder jetting. We think it's a different technology today compared to the other binder jetting processes. This is why we single it out.
Exactly. I think they're not small anymore. They are grown out of the startup
Yes.
realm, but they are not very popular or not very well known, especially here in Europe or in APEC, since they're not very active here yet. So I think it's always worth to have a look at this technology. There's another question that came up, especially related to the revenue numbers. I think that's something that always comes up. We are posting revenues, so we label it revenues. But in the end, it's always the question about when is the machine being delivered and what do we try to measure? Where do we define when does it pop up in our market?
Yeah, this is the question we receive our information that we use for our report from the system suppliers directly. For example, here, how much revenue was generated in the year of 2022. And along with this goes the information, how many machines were sold. Now, does this always indicate an installed machine? I think this is especially when you look at the end of the year, there might be sometimes an overlapping period where this is not always the same case, but we look at a full year. Long lead times have been very important, I think, in 2020, 2021. The companies we talked to, they have been very good on the production side and have been able to overcome the supply chain issues. I think this is another question in the Q&A here. So the information we had was that the delivery times have been going down, certainly. So maybe in the overlapping periods from the year end, this might be a different number, but overall we question on sold units, and this is what we then report in our findings.
Okay, I think that answers also mostly this question about supply chain issues. I think it was last year a big topic in the report. I think there was some revenues being held back by deliveries not being completed by companies. I think that was relaxing a little bit. That was also my impression from the interviews we did. Do you see any impact of the Ukraine crisis?
Overall, not specifically in Ukraine. This is, if you look on a global scale, certainly there's a very big impact. I think a lot of defense budgets have been raised due to this, and additive manufacturing will have a very big impact or an increasing impact in defense, especially in military aircraft. In new programs, I think AM is a very important part of many applications in jet fighters, for example. And I think the budgets that are pushed out now will also advance or use advancements that are enabled through additive manufacturing. So I think at the end of the day, this conflict has a very big impact on AM for the defense sector.
What I also remember from some interview partners is an impact on material pricing indirectly from the Ukraine conflict. I think we all tracked the material prices went on a spike somewhere in 2022, and then I think they got lower again after some time. But there was an impact on some users regarding the importance of moving to additive manufacturing. I heard that especially about DED companies, that printing a DED raw part from wire is less material consuming and reduces a little bit the risk of titanium or nickel-based supplies. So maybe there's an indirect effect also. I think also a very interesting question, new LPBF technologies. Someone asked about Führer area printing, Vulkan forms with 100 kilowatt or 150 laser machines. What's happening there? There's a lot of money going into this technology. I think our maturity index lists them somewhere. It always, I think, also depends a lot on when are we visiting them and when do we see it firsthand. we know there's always a lot being written, but if you really see it firsthand, this is really the moment, I think, when you can see the truth of what potential is really behind it. What impact does it have? What's your opinion about those technologies?
It's a certainly bold claim that we see here, big potential. At the end of the day, I think it's too early to say how much of this will be able to be industrialized on a large scale. This is something where we see the very big potential that is out there, but too early to say will it succeed or not? Will it replace something? Will it be the future of particle fusion?
I think the interesting question is mostly about the timeline behind it. I think a lot of companies expect things to happen within 5 years to industrialize such technology, or even faster. I think we are by nature a bit more conservative with our assumptions there, because we've all experienced the difficulties it takes to produce a medical product, an aerospace grade product, bring it to market, ensure that the machine is producing the same reliable quality each and every time. And I think it's a question of time. And again, I think one of the important factors that we also have in our maturity index is the supply chain. If there's just one supplier, again, of those technologies, it's extremely difficult to really have a widespread adoption. And short, it depends a little bit if other companies can join those technologies, and they're going to offer similar technologies to the market at some point. Let's have a look. I think I've probably missed some questions.
I think Timo copied one from the chat, I believe. What do you think about the definitions ISO 52900? My last sentence was that this definition of the technologies, if this is meant by the questions, is categorized only in 7 areas. And what we found that for us in our daily work with all these different technologies, with I believe only in metals it's 160 vendors, in polymers it's a couple hundred to 200 to 300. We have from our daily work difficulties just putting everything into one bucket. This is why we found that we need to categorize it to smaller segments. And I think we have in total now 35 metal and polymer, 35 different categories. So AM is getting more and more complicated. That's a problem. We see a new technology principle released pretty much every other half year, if not at a faster rate. So it's too simple to put everything into 7 categories.
One more question regarding sustainability just came up. There's a lot of developments on the sustainability front, and you have a calculator. Can you summarize sustainability of AM shortly? Is it getting closer to being greener in most of the cases, or still continues to be case by case defined? It's in the end case by case, I would say. I think if I remember right, in our publication, aluminum is often not more sustainable.
It depends. If you look at, I think only, first of all, the production method, then it depends a lot of the energy that is already bound inside of the material. And powder has simply a very high energy need to just get the powder. And then when you look at the use case, this is also where, of course, a lot of the CO2 footprint, this is, of course, very much case by case and how you calculate it. But the question is always, have you optimized the use case already? For example, for lightweight, or do you consider a comparison with the part that was created 30 years ago? And then sometimes AM can be, of course, on the greener side. For example, the titanium production, it is very much so, often in the production side. On the use case side, in comparison, you always have to consider, do you have already optimized it, for example, for a machining application, and then compare it to AM? If you do not optimize it for machining, for casting, and then compare it to an optimized, topology optimized AM part, then AM will most likely always win. If you compare the optimized parts, AM can win and often does, but not necessarily always does.
So it's not necessarily the technology itself that brings the advantage, but the design in the end, the application, by optimizing the material volume, by reducing to absolute necessary minimum, we see the impact.
And AM definitely helped in pushing out these tools and making people use them.
Will the report contain the metal feedstock market size and their compound growth rate per region? It contains the feedstock, but I don't think we break it as a standard down to regions.
No, we have not broken it down to regions. It's broken down in the report by industry and I believe by alloy. As well as in polymer, as well as in metals. So we always distinguish everything between metal and polymer. This is very important. There's an overview where these two technologies are mixed, but later on we always distinguish between these two areas, metal and polymer, strictly because we think it doesn't make sense to put it together. For distinguishing it by region, this is something we can do, but it's more on a customized project side. Not in the default, let's say, version of the report.
Okay. So one is popping up here, GE and binder jetting. GE was starting at Formnext, stating at Formnext that metal binder jetting will be 1 to 10, so 10 times. So one tenth of the LPBF price in the future, I assume price per part or price per kilogram. Do you believe this will happen? I think if the parts get small enough, yes. I think large parts, it's all about utilization of the build volume. And what I found interesting from the calculations we did with our cost calculator in our binder jetting studies we did is that in most cases, the machines that we already have today, the HP machine, the P50 production system by Desktop Metal, the GE machine, the price per part, the cost per part doesn't differ much anymore because the impact of printing becomes much smaller, at least for small parts that you can master very well. And the impact of powder, the impact of cost for powder, cost for feedstock, and cost for sintering is becoming so large that printing doesn't really matter anymore. So the machines we have today don't need to be further optimized if they make it to an industrial grade. I think at this point, we have a chance to be much cheaper than laser powder bed. 1/10 is sportive, I think. I think in the current calculations we are maybe at 30% of the costs we have today for parts, maybe 20% in best case. 10% of today's LPBF price is challenging as well, also because LPBF is getting more productive with 100 micron layers processes, with also cheaper powders here and there that can be utilized and so on. I think 1/10 is challenging. I would say 20% of the price today in optimum case might be possible.
Depends on the part at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It has its limitations, but also its benefits for sinter-based technology.
And if you can further develop it, today we still, almost everyone in binder jetting still utilizes batch furnaces, and batch furnaces are extremely expensive. Most of them are also using vacuum furnaces, which are also more expensive again, with higher consumable costs, higher energy costs, and so on. So if we can move to continuous furnaces, at this point it's becoming interesting because then you get down to the rates you're used to for press sintering, or metal injection molding, and then we can talk about 1/10 of pricing. But again, similar to the Führer technology, similar to Vulcan forms, it's still a couple of years that we have to plan in until we can see that really happening. So let's see.
I think that's all the questions we covered.
Most interesting new corner on error market regardless of material. Okay, I'm not sure if I understand that right. Let's take that as a last question. Based on your knowledge, what is the most interesting new corner on the AM market, regardless of material? Polymer and metal, I assume. New corner, AM market. I think for me, it's surprising that with Führer and similar, there's even 2 startups or companies now really revolutionizing laser powder bed. I think it had been advanced. There had been advancement over the past 20 years. The technology became better, more mature, faster, but it had limits. And someone was really reinventing this technology. I think this is a stronger development in this area of real area printing compared to what we've seen in polymer laser powder bed or multi-jet fusion, compared to what we see in DLP or in FDM. It only had been incremental advancements, as I can see it, in terms of mainly productivity, quality, and so on. But I think what they're doing in area printing or in those types of technologies is another, it's a much stronger step forward, I would say.
It's what I see. So if you leave out material, I think material development will be very interesting, metal as well as polymer sites, to find more materials specifically for AM. So I think that is something that the research side has been lacking the last 15 years and just neglected. What I think is most interesting, though, is less on the technological side, but the user readiness that we have today. So a lot of users have been investigating AM for the last 5 to 10 years. They bought a machine mid of 2010s, tried out some stuff, that often were not succeeding directly to find these serial applications, but were still looking and having troubles to establishing AM in their companies. And we see more and more now these companies that have very, very big success in now getting the systems out and getting serial applications out that are produced with AM. I think this has a lot to do with the readiness from the users, and also with the understanding that AM, especially on a larger scale application, will only have success if it's already introduced into the design aspects of a new program. If you take, for example, large airplane, it will have today a chance to replace a part here and there, but there's limits, and you cannot go any further than what has been maybe done today.
But now it's medical, right? You don't replace an existing medical product just with AM simply.
But now, if you see the very new developments, new engines, new, for example, in energy, gas turbines, larger parts that you can build now, that you can integrate everything. Look at the space sector, where you have these rockets, rocket launchers and everything, all in one place, all in one piece instead of 150 pieces well together. This is where AM can really enable things. And I think a lot of companies are now ready to implement this into their new machines, into their new applications. And this is where it gets really interesting, because then it will grow even faster than it is today.
Good point. All right. Thanks, Max. Timo, I'm sorry there was no specific polymer question I referred you to, but thanks for joining anyway and managing a little bit our confusion we obviously had a little bit with finding the chat or the Q&A button. I hope Teams is also evolving, and next year the Q&A or F&A button will be found easier, and maybe we can also integrate the video better into the PowerPoint presentation. Thanks, guys, for joining. Thanks again. Make sure to check out the website, check out our report, download the management summary where you can find a few more additional points. Thanks, Max, for all the questions answered. And yeah, hope to see you all at one of the exhibitions, conferences, or at some meeting at one of your companies.
Thank you very much. Any questions, just follow up with an email. We're easy to reach and happy to engage any discussions in AM. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.